There is something different about people like you, and whether you realized it early in life or only recently began to understand it, the pattern has always been there. You walk into a room, and without saying much, the energy shifts. Conversations become awkward. Some people become unusually defensive. Others suddenly feel the need to explain themselves, even when no explanation was asked for. For years, you may have thought this was your imagination. You may have convinced yourself that you were overanalyzing, that you were reading too deeply into people's reactions. But the truth is far more powerful than that. What's happening is that your presence disrupts false realities. Most people spend their lives constructing emotional masks. They build identities designed for approval, protection, control, or validation. They carefully shape how they want to be perceived, often becoming so attached to these false versions of themselves that they forget where the performance ends and who they really are begins. And for most of the world, those masks work. People accept what they're shown. They respond to appearances. They engage with the carefully curated version standing in front of them, but not you. There is something in your nature that sees past the performance. You don't have to search for it. You don't have to interrogate anyone or gather evidence. You simply feel when something is off. You notice the subtle tension between what someone says and what their energy reveals. You pick up on inconsistencies others dismiss. You sense the cracks in the image they're trying to project. And here's what makes this so powerful. You often reveal these truths without saying a word. This is why some people feel uncomfortable around you before they even know why. It's not because you've done anything wrong. It's not because you're confrontational. It's because your presence creates a kind of emotional mirror. And mirrors can be deeply unsettling for people who have spent years avoiding their own reflection. Heyoka has this rare ability to expose illusions simply by existing authentically. Your energy interrupts the false narratives people tell themselves. It challenges the masks they wear so comfortably around everyone else. And because most people are not prepared to face that level of truth, their reactions can be confusing. Some may pull away. Some may become irritated. Some may even project their discomfort onto you and make you feel as though you're the problem. You are not. What they're reacting to is the discomfort of being seen. And if you've spent your life wondering why people either connect with you deeply or seem strangely unsettled by your presence, this is why. You carry an energy that does not cooperate with illusion. You were never designed to validate what is false. You were built to reveal what is real. That is the first sign of a Heyoka. Your presence alone forces truth to the surface. And truth always changes the room. If the first sign is that your presence disrupts false realities, then the second sign goes even deeper. It's that you see through people faster than they can perform. And if this has been your experience, then you already know how strange this can feel. You've probably had moments where someone was speaking to you, saying all the right things, wearing the right expression, projecting exactly what they wanted everyone to believe, and yet something inside you immediately told you that what you were hearing wasn't the full truth. You couldn't always explain it. There wasn't always clear evidence. There was nothing obvious to point to at all. But deep down you knew that knowing is not suspicion. It's not negativity. It's not judgment. It's perception. Most people are trained to process communication at the surface level. They hear words and assume the words are the message. They listen to tone and accept it at face value. If someone smiles, they assume warmth. If someone speaks confidently, they assume certainty. If someone appears calm, they assume peace. But Heyokas operate differently. You process what exists underneath the performance. You notice the pause before the answer. You catch the micro-expression that flashes across someone's face for half a second before they correct it. You feel the emotional dissonance between what someone is saying and what they are actually experiencing. You pick up on shifts in energy that most people would never consciously register. And because this awareness happens so naturally, you may have spent years doubting it. You may have told yourself, maybe I'm imagining things. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. Maybe I'm being unfair. Then later, the truth reveals itself. The lie surfaces. The hidden motive becomes obvious. The mask slips. And once again, you realize that your instincts were right all along. This is one of the most defining traits of a Heyoka empath. You don't need people to confess who they are. They show you, often without realizing it. This ability can feel isolating because it changes the way you move through the world. It becomes difficult to fully engage with people who are disconnected from their own authenticity. Small talk feels exhausting because you can sense the emotional emptiness behind it. Forced charm feels transparent. Manipulation feels almost visible. And this is why certain people are immediately drawn to you, while others become deeply uncomfortable. Authentic people often feel relief around someone like you. They sense they don't have to perform. They can simply be. But those who rely on image, control, or emotional deception feel exposed. Your awareness becomes a threat to the version of themselves they're trying to sell. What's important is understanding that this gift is not here to make you cynical. It's here to make you discerning. There is a difference. Cynicism closes the heart. Discernment protects it. A Heyoka doesn't see through people to judge. Them. A Heyoka sees through people to understand truth clearly enough to navigate life without illusion. That ability is rare. And when you stop doubting it, when you stop apologizing for what you can perceive, you begin to step fully into your power. Because the moment you trust what you see is the moment no performance can ever fool you again. Now, once you begin to understand that you disrupt false realities and that you can see through people faster than they can perform, the third sign starts to make perfect sense. And this is the one that often confuses people the most, because on the surface, it can seem contradictory. You use humor to expose truths others are afraid to face. This is one of the most misunderstood qualities of a Heyoka empath. People often assume empathy always looks soft, gentle, comforting, and reassuring. They imagine the empath as someone who only nurtures, only soothes, only provides emotional safety. And while compassion is absolutely part of your nature, Heyoka energy carries something much sharper. It disrupts, it challenges, it reveals. And one of the most powerful tools it uses to do that is humor. Think about the moments when you've said something playful, ironic, or unexpectedly honest, and suddenly the entire atmosphere shifted. Maybe people laughed, but underneath that laughter was discomfort. Maybe someone smiled, but their expression tightened for just a moment. Maybe what you said seemed light on the surface, yet everyone in the room felt the deeper truth hidden inside it. That is not accidental. A Heyoka often has an instinctive ability to wrap truth in humor because humor bypasses resistance. When truth is delivered directly, people often become defensive. Their walls go up, their ego immediately moves to protect itself. But when truth arrives through irony, wit, or unexpected observation, it slips past those defenses before they even realize what happened. And for a brief moment, they see clearly. That's your gift. You have the ability to say what others can feel but cannot articulate. You can expose contradictions people are trying to ignore. You can point to emotional realities everyone senses, but no one is willing to acknowledge. Sometimes this shows up as quick observations that catch people completely off guard. Sometimes it's a perfectly timed comment that shifts an entire conversation. Sometimes is it laughter that reveals exactly how absurd a false narrative really is. And let me tell you something important. This isn't cruelty. It isn't mockery. It isn't about tearing people down. It's about awakening awareness. There's a difference between humor that humiliates and humor that illuminates. A true Heyoka doesn't use sharpness to wound. They use it to awaken. They hold up truth in a way that allows people to recognize it for themselves. Of course, not everyone appreciates this. Some people will misunderstand your intentions. They may think you're being difficult. They may accuse you of being too intense, too blunt, too unconventional. What they often fail to understand is that your humor is not random. It's intuitive precision. You instinctively know when a situation is trapped in illusion, and your words become the unexpected force that breaks the tension and cracks the mask. That's why your humor often carries a strange kind of depth. People may laugh in the moment only to think about what you said hours later and suddenly realize how much truth it contained. That's Heyoka energy at work. It unsettles because it reveals. It surprises because it cuts through. E.g.h. pretense. And when fully understood, it becomes one of the most transformative ways truth can enter a person's life. Because sometimes the fastest way to wake someone up is to make them laugh at the illusion they were living in. By this point, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. You disrupt false realities. You see through people faster than they can perform. You use truth, often through humor, to crack through illusion. And all of this leads directly to the fourth sign, one of the most powerful and often overwhelming realities of being a Heyoka. You naturally trigger transformation in others. This is not something you consciously set out to do. In fact, many Heyokas spend years confused by the effect they seem to have on people. You may have entered relationships, friendships, workplaces, or even brief conversations with no intention other than simply being yourself, only to watch those interactions create ripple effects far bigger than expected. People change around you. Sometimes those changes are subtle. Sometimes they are immediate and undeniable. A person who has been avoiding hard truths suddenly begins questioning their life choices after a single conversation. Be with you. Someone who has been emotionally guarded for years unexpectedly opens up in your presence. Someone who has been living behind a carefully constructed image begins unraveling because they can no longer maintain the performance around you. And then there are the other reactions. Some people disappear. Some become defensive. Some resist so strongly that they create distance without fully understanding why. If this has happened to you repeatedly, it is not random. Your energy creates movement. Heyoka Empath carries a presence that stirs what has been dormant. You activate self-reflection in others, whether they're ready for it or not. You challenge emotional stagnation simply by existing authentically. And because transformation is rarely comfortable, the reactions you receive can be intense. This is where many Heyokas struggle. For a long time, you may have blamed yourself for these patterns. You may have wondered why people initially connect with you so deeply, only to later pull away or become unsettled. You may have questioned whether you were somehow too much, too intense, too perceptive, too disruptive. But the truth is far more important to understand. ENS formation often feels like destruction before it feels like growth. When people encounter someone who reflects their truth back to them, they are forced into a choice. They can evolve, or they can retreat deeper into denial. Some will choose growth. These are the people who leave your presence stronger, clearer, and more aligned with themselves. They may not always realize it immediately, but something shifts. Your influence becomes a catalyst that helps them confront what they've avoided and step into who they were meant to become. Others will resist. Not because you harmed them, not because your intentions were wrong, but because truth demands change, and not everyone is ready to change. This is why being a Heyoka can sometimes feel lonely. Your role is not always to provide comfort in the way people expect. Sometimes your greatest act of empathy is disruption. Sometimes your presence creates the discomfort necessary for awakening. And that takes strength. It takes maturity to understand that not everyone who walks away is rejecting you. Often, they are rejecting the reflection they saw in themselves. So if you've spent years carrying the weight of other people's affairs, actions, release that burden. You are not responsible for whether someone accepts the truth you reveal. Your purpose is simply to carry it. Because a true Heyoka does not force transformation, they ignite it. And once that spark is lit, nothing remains the same. And this brings us to the final sign, the one that, for many of you, will explain years of confusion in a way nothing else ever has. You've felt misunderstood because you were never meant to blend in. If you are truly a Heyoka, then chances are your life has been marked by a quiet sense of difference that you could never fully explain. Long before you had language for it, you felt it. You noticed that you moved through the world differently. You observed things other people ignored. You felt emotional undercurrents that no one else seemed to acknowledge. And because you couldn't easily explain what you were experiencing, you may have spent years believing something about you was out of place. Maybe you felt like the outsider in social groups, even when people welcomed you in. Maybe you've experienced that strange pattern where people are either deeply drawn to you or oddly unsettled by your presence, with very little mid-EDLE ground. Maybe you've spent years trying to soften yourself, adjust yourself, simplify yourself, anything to feel like you fit more comfortably into the spaces around you. That struggle is one of the clearest signs of Heyoka energy, because your purpose was never to blend into systems built on performance and emotional conformity. You were never meant to disappear into the background. You were never designed to become smaller so that illusion could remain undisturbed. And this is where so many Heyokas lose themselves for a time. The pressure to fit in is powerful. From an early age, most of us are taught directly or indirectly that acceptance comes through adaptation. We learn to edit ourselves to match expectations. We learn to silence instincts that make others uncomfortable. We learn to suppress the very parts of us that carry the deepest truth. For someone with Heyoka energy, this can create years of internal conflict. You may have questioned your sensitivity. You may have doubted your perceptions. You may have convinced yourself that if you could just be less aware, less intense, less different, life would somehow become easier. And perhaps it would. But it would also become smaller, because the very qualities that made you feel misunderstood are the same qualities that make your presence transformative. That ability to sense truth beneath appearances, that instinct to disrupt illusion, that unconventional perspective that sees what others cannot, that deep emotional intelligence paired with the courage to challenge what is false. These are not flaws to overcome. They are strengths to claim. The moment a Heyoka begins to understand this, everything changes. You stop asking, "Why don't I fit here?" And you start asking, "Why was I trying to fit somewhere I was meant to transform?" That shift is everything. Because when you finally stop measuring yourself against environments that were never designed for your nature, you begin to recognize your difference for what it truly is. Power, not the kind of power that dominates, not the kind that controls, but the kind that awakens, the kind that reveals, the kind that changes lives simply by standing fully in truth. So if you've spent years feeling misunderstood, hear this clearly. Your difference was never the problem. It was the proof that you were never meant to blend into the illusion. You were born to expose it.